So, if your RBT is failing to implement a behavior plan correctly, I mean, they didn't fail. You did.
Exactly. I mean, supervision isn't about catching mistakes, It's about engineering competence.
Welcome to the deep dive for behavioral intelligence. Today, we're tearing into the BACB 6th edition task list.
Yeah, specifically focusing on item I.1, which is identify the benefits of using behavior-analytic supervision.
Right. And our sources for this exploration include the BACB Ethics Code, some mock exam data, and, well, the definitive text, the Supervisor's Guidebook.
It's a classic for a reason.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, our mission today for you listening, it's simple, but it is certainly not easy. We are going to strip away the fluff.
Right, all that corporate jargon.
Yeah, the traditional HR mentalities, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to look at exactly why behavior-analytic supervision is the critical engine for improved client outcomes, elite staff performance, and high retention.
Because this is about building clinicians, not just, managers.
Exactly. And to really grasp this, I feel like we need to completely abandon the old cliches.
Oh, 100%.
Like, think of a behavior intervention plan, a BIP, not like a sports playbook that you just, hand to a player.
Right.
Think of it more like an incredibly delicate Michelin star recipe. Say, a technically demanding, perfectly risen Gruyere soufflé.
I like that analogy.
Right. You are the executive chef. You cannot just hand a junior line cook that recipe on their first day, retreat to your office to do inventory paperwork, and expect that soufflé to come out flawlessly.
No, it's going to collapse.
Exactly. You have to ensure the oven is calibrated. You have to stand next to them, physically model how to fold the egg whites without, losing the air.
Yeah, you watch them do it, correcting their wrist angle in real time.
Yes. And when the soufflé collapses, you don't blame the cook's character. You ask, where did the environment fail them?
Right. You look at the contingencies in the kitchen.
But so, why exactly does our supervision need to be specifically behavior analytic? Like, if I own a clinic, why can't I just rely on the standard management techniques that Fortune 500 companies use to run my teams?
Well, the fundamental disconnect happens when we view supervision as an administrative burden, right? Rather than a clinical intervention itself.
A clinical intervention, okay.
Yeah, because in a traditional corporate environment, management is often entirely focused on compliance, output, minimizing liability.
Just checking boxes.
Exactly. But in applied behavior analysis, we are operating in a deeply complex, constantly shifting clinical ecology.
Right. The stakes are way higher.
They are. So the shift you have to make is this: your supervision must be treated as a behavior change intervention itself.
Okay, so the benefits outlined in task list item I.1, they aren't just like separate perks.
No, they are a sequential causal chain. It goes first, improved client outcomes; second, improved staff performance; and third, staff retention.
So they're inextricably linked.
Completely linked. I mean, you cannot achieve the first without mastering the second. And you can't sustain the second without securing the third.
I really want to unpack this causal chain thoroughly. Because, if I am a clinic director, I am looking at my P&L statements, my profit and loss, and I just see compartmentalization.
Oh, yeah, the silos.
Exactly. I see my clinical department sweating over the clients and the graphs. I see my training department worrying about staff performance and competency checklists.
Right.
And then I have my HR department having an absolute panic attack over retention and turnover rates.
And they treat them as three entirely different ecosystems within one business.
Right. So why is that a mistake?
Well, that compartmentalized thinking is precisely why so many agencies are, frankly, bleeding staff and struggling with flatline client progress.
Yeah.
Let's start with the ultimate dependent variable, which is improved client outcomes. In our science, the entire reason our field exists, the justification for every insurance authorization, is to facilitate meaningful behavior change for the client.
Right. That's the whole point of what we do.
But the BCBA, the supervisor, is typically not the one delivering the minute-by-minute contingencies.
No, you might see the client for, 2 hours a week?
If that. The behavior technician, the RBT, is with them for 30 hours a week. They're the ones actually applying the science.
So the client's outcome is directly, mathematically dependent on the staff's performance.
Exactly. If the staff's performance improves, the client's behavior improves. It's a direct correlation.
Which brings us to the second link in the chain, right? Improved staff performance.
Yes.
And based on the Supervisor's Guidebook, this isn't achieved by just sitting in a conference room and giving a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, please no. No, it's achieved by utilizing a very specific protocol called behavioral skills training, or BST.
Okay, before we go further, let's make sure we are defining our terms for the listeners. What is the actual mechanism of BST that makes it so much better than traditional corporate training?
Well, traditional training assumes that if an employee just hears information, they will automatically translate it into accurate physical execution.
Which we know is a complete fallacy.
Telling is not teaching, period. Behavioral skills training is the gold standard because it relies on 4 distinct mandatory phases.
Instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback.
Exactly. It ensured what we call procedural integrity, meaning the intervention is being implemented exactly as it was written every single time.
So we are applying the exact same science of learning to our staff that we apply to our clients.
You have to. You absolutely have to.
Let's tie this into the third benefit, which I think is actually the most contentious one, staff retention.
It's a hot topic for sure.
Yeah. The Supervisor's Guidebook emphasizes that burnout is the primary driver of turnover. But I want to push back on this on behalf of every clinic owner listening.
Go for it.
Because a lot of agencies think higher pay is the absolute only way to retain staff. They throw their hands up and say, I can't control retention because I don't control the budget or the Medicaid rates.
Right. If HR would just pay these RBTs $3 more an hour, they wouldn't burn out.
Exactly. So how does supervision, specifically behavior analytic supervision, actually prevent burnout? Are you really telling me that better training trumps a higher hourly wage?
I'm telling you that we need to completely redefine what burnout actually is, using the science of human behavior.
Okay, so define it behaviorally.
Burnout is not some mysterious internal state of emotional exhaustion. Behaviorally speaking, burnout happens when a staff member puts in an incredibly high level of response effort, but contacts a near zero rate of reinforcement.
Wow. Okay, so it's a schedule of reinforcement issue.
Exactly. Consider the matching law. It essentially states that the rate of behavior will match the rate of reinforcement available for that behavior relative to the effort required.
Let's ground the matching law in a real workplace scenario. Give me an example of how this plays out on the clinic floor.
Sure. Imagine an RBT assigned to a client who engages in severe, high-magnitude aggression, hitting, kicking, biting.
Yeah, a really tough case.
The response effort required for the RBT to implement a complex differential reinforcement procedure while simultaneously blocking aggression and keeping their cool. It's monumental.
It is physically and psychologically exhausting.
Right. They are absorbing a massive amount of behavioral hits, so to speak. Now, if the supervisor is just sitting in a back office, only emerging to point out that the RBT missed a data point on their tablet.
Oh, man.
What is the rate of reinforcement for the RBT's correct implementation?
It's 0.
It's worse than 0. The supervisor has literally become a punisher.
Wow. So under the matching law, if the response effort is astronomically high and the reinforcement is 0 or even aversive, the behavior of showing up to work and implementing that plan.
It will extinguish. They will quit.
That is a massive paradigm shift. We are essentially looking at burnout as a severe deficit of workplace reinforcement.
That's exactly what it is.
If a clinician is running a high-magnitude extinction procedure, and for you listening, that means we are completely withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced challenging behavior, which often results in a temporary spike or burst of that severe behavior.
Right, the extinction burst.
Yeah, the RBT is the one weathering that storm. So if the supervisor isn't physically present to deliver an equally high magnitude of reinforcement for that RBT's correct execution,
then the RBT's behavior undergoes extinction. That is the exact mechanism at play.
that makes so much sense.
And the Supervisor's Guidebook points out a tragic reality in many human service organizations. Management attention focuses almost entirely on problematic staff performance.
Right. Good performance is just ignored because it's quote-unquote expected.
Exactly. So when the supervisor finally does show up in the room, the staff immediately associate their presence with criticism. The supervisor becomes an aversive stimulus.
And then the RBT starts engaging in escape or avoidance behaviors.
Right. Calling out sick, hiding in the break room, or worst case, falsifying data to avoid a reprimand.
But when you flip that structure, when you use an outcome management approach and provide routine, positive feedback,
You change the entire function of your presence. You become a conditioned reinforcer. Staff stay in environments where their competence is recognized,
right,
where they feel successful, and where their grueling hard work contacts meaningful reinforcement.
Okay, so understanding these theoretical benefits is one thing. But theory doesn't survive contact with reality unless we know how to actually apply it.
Very true.
How does this look in a messy, chaotic clinical setting? Let's look at a real-world application from our mock scenario sources.
Let's do it.
I want to build out a very specific scenario. Imagine an RBT is implementing a BIP for a 9-year-old client with autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
The client is in a mainstream third-grade classroom and exhibits severe disruptive behaviors, shouting, throwing materials, dropping to the floor, and this happens specifically during transitions between subjects.
A very common scenario.
Right. Now, during your formal observation as the BCBA, you notice the RBT is consistently missing the antecedent modifications.
Which is a huge problem.
Yeah. And for context, antecedent modifications are proactive changes made to the environment before a behavior occurs to prevent it.
Right. Manipulating the environment to make the behavior unnecessary.
Exactly. So the plan explicitly states the RBT needs to present a visual schedule and verbally prime the client 2 minutes before transition.
Okay, clear instructions.
But instead, the RBT is just waiting for the teacher to say, okay, class, time for math. The client throws their desk, and then the RBT reacts by trying to physically prompt the client.
So they are completely failing to follow the proactive part of the plan.
Yes. Now, if I am a traditional manager, my instinct is to pull that RBT into the hallway, issue a verbal reprimand, and just say, you need to follow the behavior plan, read page 4 again.
Or just email HR and ask to swap the RBT off the case, right?
Yeah, exactly, to protect the client's progress.
Yeah.
So why is that the wrong move?
It is the wrong move because it violates the basic premise of supervisor accountability.
Which means?
In our field, the quality of staff performance is a direct reflection of your supervision.
Oh, wow.
We do not view the inadequate performance as an inherent character flaw in the RBT. We don't say they are lazy or incompetent.
We view it as an environmental deficit.
Exactly. An environmental deficit that we, as behavior analysts, are ethically responsible for fixing. So rather than punishing, we assess.
We have to figure out why the performance is lacking before we try to change it.
We use a functional assessment approach for our staff, just like we do for our clients.
And the BCB tasks us with applying a function-based approach to this, specifically utilizing tools like the Performance Diagnostic Checklist Human Services.
Yes, the PDCHS.
Let's drill into the PDC-HS. We aren't just guessing why the RBT isn't using the visual schedule. The PDCHS forces us to look at 4 specific domains of the workplace environment.
It does.
Walk me through how we would apply this to our 9-year-old classroom scenario.
Let's break it down domain by domain. The first domain is training.
Okay.
We have to look in the mirror and ask, did we actually train this RBT on how to use a visual schedule?
Or did we just hand them a 20-page document and assume they knew how to apply it?
Exactly. Have they ever physically practiced priming a transition? If the answer is no, we have a skill deficit.
That makes total sense. What's the second domain?
Task clarification and prompting. Does the RBT know exactly when to use the schedule?
Because maybe the classroom is super chaotic.
Right. And there is no clock visible from where the RBT sits, so they don't even know when the 2-minute warning is supposed to happen.
So they need an environmental prompt, like a vibrating timer on their wrist.
Precisely. We are looking at the stimulus control.
What about the third domain?
The third domain is resources, materials, and processes. And honestly, this is often the most overlooked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we write, use a visual schedule in the plan, but are the visual schedules actually printed, laminated, Velcroed, and easily accessible in the classroom?
Or are they buried in a backpack across the room?
Exactly. If the RBT has to leave the client side for 30 seconds to dig through a bag to find the schedule, the response effort is way too high.
And the disruptive behavior will occur before they even find it.
100%. And finally, the fourth domain, performance consequences. Let's say the RBT does use the visual schedule correctly on Monday.
Right. Does anyone notice?
Does the supervisor provide immediate praise? If they do it right and get no feedback, but they do it wrong and get yelled at, the contingencies are completely backwards.
So instead of just saying, do better, we are systematically hunting down the barrier in the environment.
That's the science.
Let's say we complete the PDCHS, and we determine it's primarily a skill deficit in the training domain. The RBP fundamentally just does not know the physical mechanics of how to prime a transition effectively without triggering the client.
Okay, so now we bring in behavioral skills training.
How do we execute the 4 steps of BST in this classroom?
Well, first off, we don't pull them into an office. We do this in the natural environment.
In the classroom.
Yes. Step 1 is instruction. We provide a clear, concise, verbal and written description of the antecedent modification. We explain why we prime the transition.
Simple enough.
Step 2 is modeling, and this is critical. The supervisor must step in and physically model the skill with the 9-year-old client in the classroom.
So you actually take over and show them.
You have to. You show the RBT exactly what tone of voice to use, where to stand, how to present the visual schedule, and how to deliver the warning.
Here's where I see clinical directors fail all the time. They model the skill, they turn to the RBT and say, does that make sense?
And the RBT nods because they don't want to look foolish.
Exactly. And then the supervisor just leaves.
Yeah.
They completely skip step 3.
And that omission is where procedural integrity dies.
Because step 3 is rehearsal.
Rehearsal is the absolute linchpin of the entire process.
Yeah.
You must have the RBT rehearse the antecedent modifications while you stand there and watch.
You literally have them run the next transition.
Yes, which transitions directly into step 4, feedback.
Right.
You provide immediate outcome-based feedback. If the RBT holds the visual schedule too far away, you correct the error in real time, safely and constructively.
And when they approximate the correct performance.
You deliver heavy social praise.
But we shouldn't just say, like, good job using the schedule.
Yeah.
We need to tie their behavior to the client's outcome, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We should be saying something like, notice how the client's disruptive behavior dropped to 0 during that transition when you delivered the visual prompt exactly at the 2-minute mark.
You completely prevented that meltdown.
Yeah.
That is the pinnacle of outcome-based positive feedback. You are making the mechanism of their success explicit. You are connecting the staff's specific behavior to the client's success.
That is what makes this grueling job rewarding.
That is what prevents burnout.
Mm.
You are making the RBT acutely aware of their own clinical power when they see that their precise execution changed a child's life in that moment.
The behavior of implementing the plan is deeply reinforced. We are treating the RBT's implementation behavior with the exact same scientific rigor we use for the client's target behavior.
Because if the learner isn't learning, the teacher isn't teaching.
And if the RBT isn't implementing, the BCBA isn't supervising.
I know where it is.
This systematic approach, it makes complete logical sense. When you lay it out like a scientific formula, it sounds foolproof.
It does.
Yet supervisors constantly fall into a few predictable, catastrophic traps that destroy their effectiveness and violate the ethics code.
Sadly, yes.
Let's dig into these common mistakes. What are the massive clinical traps that sabotage everything we just talked about?
There are 3 major clinical traps that we see routinely in the field, and they all represent direct violations of the BACB ethics code.
Specifically Section 4, right?
Yes, Section 4, which governs our responsibility to supervisees and trainees. Trap number 1 is what I call supervision in name only.
Ooh, tell me about that.
According to our ethics texts, particularly the insights from Bailey and Birch, relying on indirect supervision is a dangerous, unethical practice.
Indirect meaning what?
I am talking about the supervisor who just sits in a clinic office, pulls an RBT into the hallway for 5 minutes and asks, "Hey, how's it going with that 9-year-old today? Any major behaviors?"
So they aren't actually watching them?
No. The term supervision itself is almost a non-behavioral term. The behavioral equivalent is shaping.
Right. And you cannot shape a behavior you cannot see.
Exactly. Failing to directly observe the staff and failing to use BST means you are relying purely on self-reporting.
And self-reporting is notoriously unreliable.
Very.
Not because people are intentionally lying or trying to be deceptive, but because they might not even know they are making errors.
They don't know what they don't know.
Right. They might think they're running the program perfectly because they haven't had clinical eyes on them to correct what we call procedural drift.
Procedural drift is a silent killer of clinical progress.
Let's unpack procedural drift for the listener.
Well, procedural drift occurs when the implementation of an intervention slowly, incrementally changes over time, drifting away from the originally written plan.
Give me an example.
Okay, a plan might call for a 0-second prompt delay, meaning the RBT should prompt the client immediately.
Right.
But over 2 weeks, the RBT gets a little tired, a little distracted, and that 0-second delay drifts to a 1-second delay, then a 3-second delay.
And suddenly the client is engaging in errors and the data is tanking.
Exactly. The RBT isn't doing it maliciously. Human behavior naturally drifts without maintenance contingencies. Without direct observation, procedural drift is guaranteed.
Okay, trap number 2 is the punisher supervisor. We touched on this with the matching law, but I want to dive deeper into the psychological environment this creates.
It's toxic.
This is the supervisor who operates entirely on crisis management. They only show up when there's an incident report, when a parent complains, or when the data takes a massive dive.
This is a management style entirely reliant on aversive control.
Yeah.
When you only interact with your staff to deliver bad news, correct mistakes, or demand compliance, you establish yourself as an unconditioned punisher.
And the clinical cost of this is catastrophic.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. The RDT's behavior is no longer governed by positive reinforcement. It becomes governed by negative reinforcement, specifically escape and avoidance.
So they will do the bare minimum required to just avoid your wrath.
Yes, they will hide anomalous data. They will avoid asking for help when they are confused about a program, because asking for help means inviting the punisher into the room.
It breeds a culture of fear.
And fear is fundamentally incompatible with a supportive clinical environment.
Which brings us to trap number 3, abandoning the data.
Oh, this one drives me crazy.
This is when supervisors evaluate their supervisees based on like a gut feeling or a general impression of their personality rather than objective metrics.
Right, but Code 4.08 explicitly requires ongoing evidence-based data collection and performance monitoring of supervisees.
We demand rigorous graph-based data for our clients, yet we evaluate our staff on vibes.
It is hypocritical and unethical. You must take data on your staff's procedural integrity. You must take data on your inter-observer agreement, or IOA.
And for those studying, IOA is when 2 observers take data on the same behavior simultaneously to ensure the definition is clear and the measurement is reliable.
Exactly. If your data and the RBT's data do not match, you have a massive clinical problem.
Yeah.
Furthermore, supervisors need to take data on themselves. Are you tracking how many positive statements you deliver versus corrective statements? If you aren't tracking it, you aren't managing it.
Okay, I have to interject here and push back on this entire premise
Okay, let's hear it.
because I hear the theoretical perfection of this. But I talk to overwhelmed BCBAs every single day.
I know, they're exhausted.
They are. They say, I have a caseload of 15 clients. I am drowning in insurance reassessments, medical necessity reviews, and parent training calls.
Yep, billing 130 hours a month.
Exactly. They say, I simply do not have the time to run a full 4-step BST protocol, complete a PDCHS, and conduct rigorous procedural integrity data tracking for every single program with every single RBT.
It sounds impossible to them.
Right. So what is the clinical danger of taking shortcuts? Is it really that detrimental to just do a quick verbal check-in to save time?
The answer is yes, it is that detrimental.
Really?
The clinical danger is explicit in the data, and the consequences are severe. Ineffective supervision directly leads to ethical violations, harm to the client, and damage to the professional reputation of the entire field.
That's a heavy claim.
Here is the hard truth about time management and behavior analysis. When you skip BST, you are not saving time. You are simply deferring the time cost with interest.
Deferring the time cost with interest. That's a brilliant way to frame it. The bill always comes due.
Always. The 30 minutes you quote-unquote saved today by skipping the modeling and rehearsal phases will cost you 10 hours next month.
Doing what?
You will spend those 10 hours dealing with a massive spike in aggressive behaviors because the plan wasn't run correctly. You will spend it in defensive meetings with furious parents.
Oh, man.
You will spend it writing appeals to insurance companies who are threatening to pull funding due to lack of progress. And you will spend it conducting endless interviews to hire and retrain new staff because your frustrated RBT finally quit.
Wow. So you either pay the time up front in proactive structured training, or you pay it tenfold on the back end in chaotic reactive crisis management.
That is exactly the choice you are making every single day.
That is a phenomenal transition into how we prove we understand this on paper.
Yes, the exam.
Because these exact traps and the ethical codes that govern them are precisely what the BACB tests you on. We need to understand the HRW and the WHY behind the Pearson VUE testing logic.
It's so important.
It is one thing to understand this conceptually, right? It is another to stare at a multiple-choice question and know exactly how the exam is trying to trick you. Let's get into the exam strategy.
Let's break it down.
I am going to act as the test taker, and I am going to intentionally pick the distractor answers. The answers that sound really good to a corporate manager, but are fundamentally wrong behaviorally. I want you to dismantle my logic.
Perfect. Listen closely to this section because this is exactly how you beat the logic for task list item I.1 and ethics section 4.
Okay.
The exam questions often present scenarios that test whether you understand the underlying function of supervision, not just the administrative rules.
All right, let's look at scenario A. The question asks for the primary reason for providing effective supervision.
Okay, what's your answer?
Looking at the options, I'm going to choose because the BACB Ethics Code legally mandates 5% supervision of all applied hours to maintain certification.
Okay.
That is a factual statement. It is true. Why is it the wrong answer?
It is the wrong answer because the exam is asking for the primary behavior analytic reason, not the bureaucratic requirement.
Okay.
The BACB wants to ensure you view the field through a clinical lens, not an administrative one. When you see a question asking for the ultimate purpose of supervision, you must choose the answer that centers on the dependent variable.
The client.
Exactly. Choose this. To improve upon supervisees' current repertoires to facilitate client improvement.
Even if maintaining certification is a required part of the process.
Right. The terminal goal of every action a behavior analyst takes is to improve the client's life. If you choose the compliance answer, you are indicating to the board that you view supervision as a box-checking exercise rather than a vital clinical mechanism.
Client is always the ultimate beneficiary.
Got it. Okay, scenario B. This is the classic what do you do first question that tricks everyone up.
Oh yeah, these are tricky.
The scenario is you're observing an RBT who is consistently failing to run a discrete trial training or DTT program correctly. What is your first course of action?
Let's hear your distractor.
I'm going to choose. Immediately pull the RBT off the case and retrain them to protect the client's progress. Oh, a lot of people pick that one.
My logic here is that as a BCBA, my primary duty is to do no harm to the client. If the RBT is messing up the DTT program, they are harming the client's progress. Retraining them sounds like a very behavioral intervention.
Yeah.
Why am I failing this question?
You are failing because you skipped the foundational step of behavior analysis. Assessment.
Right.
Retrain assumes that the root cause of the failure is a skill deficit. But what if it isn't?
What if it's an environmental issue?
Exactly. What if it is a performance deficit? What if the RBT knows exactly how to run the DTT program perfectly, but the client's token board is missing? Or the reinforcers haven't been restocked?
Or the RBT is severely sleep-deprived from a second job?
Exactly. If you immediately drag them into an office for 2 hours of intensive behavioral skills training on a skill they already possess, you are wasting valuable clinical hours.
And frustrating the staff.
Deeply frustrating them. And you haven't even solved the actual environmental problem.
So what do we choose?
Choose this instead. Identify the variables affecting performance, or initiate a performance diagnostic assessment. You must always, always assess before you intervene, even with staff behavior.
So never choose reprimand, never choose immediate termination.
And never assume the function without data.
Assess before you intervene. The exact same rule applies to clients and staff. All right, scenario C. The question asks, how do you evaluate the efficacy of your own supervisory practices? This ties directly to Code 4.08.
Oh, it does.
I'm going to choose the distractor. Conduct a biannual anonymous staff satisfaction survey to ensure supervisees feel supported and valued.
Sounds very HR.
Right. I know that supportive environments prevent burnout. So if my staff rate me a 10 out of 10 on a satisfaction survey, my supervision must be highly effective, right?
Wrong.
No.
Staff satisfaction is a wonderful metric for HR, but it is clinically insufficient for evaluating the efficacy of behavior-analytic supervision. Because a supervisee might rate you a 10 out of 10 because you are incredibly nice, you always bring them coffee, and you never give them difficult corrective feedback.
Ah, so they like you, but...
They might love you, but their implementation of the extinction procedure might still be fundamentally flawed.
That makes sense.
To evaluate the efficacy of supervision, you must look at objective clinical data. Choose this. Look for answers involving client and supervisee outcomes, reviewing procedural integrity data, and graphing the client's behavior.
Because the data doesn't lie.
Exactly. If your supervisee's implementation data is poor, or if the client's graph is flatlining or regressing, your supervision is currently ineffective, regardless of how much your staff enjoys your company.
The data is the ultimate arbiter of truth. So the distractor answers on the exam will always sound like what a standard corporate manager would do.
Focusing on legal compliance, reprimanding or retraining without assessment, and relying on HR surveys.
We have to consistently choose the answer that applies the hard science of behavior to the staff's performance and prioritizes the client's data.
Every single time.
This concept of evaluating our own supervision based on the client's graph is profound. If the client isn't making progress, we don't just endlessly tweak the intervention plan.
No, we look at the implementation.
And if the implementation is flawed, We have to look in the mirror. That is a heavy burden of accountability.
It is a heavy burden, but, it is also incredibly empowering. It means we have the scientific tools to fix the problem.
We are not helpless victims of quote-unquote bad staff.
We are architects of the clinical environment. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, moving beyond just passing the exam, we arrive at how top 1% clinical directors view this entire concept.
Let's dive into the clinical power insight. This is the advanced thinking, the synthesis of everything we've discussed.
Yes.
What is the ultimate clinical power insight regarding task list item I.1?
Here is the advanced clinical insight, and I want every clinic owner and clinical director listening to mentally write this down. Retention is a clinical variable.
Wow. Let's repeat that.
Retention is a clinical variable. Let that sink into the foundational architecture of your practice.
Because in traditional business models, we completely separate HR metrics from clinical metrics.
Completely. HR tracks the cost of turnover, the time to hire, onboarding costs, and retention rates.
And the clinical team tracks mastery criteria, behavior reduction, and inter-observer agreement.
But the insight here is that they are measuring the exact same phenomenon from two different angles.
Okay, you need to explain the mechanism of that. Because practically speaking, HR and clinical are literally two different budgets and two different departments.
Right.
How could you practically tell me they are the same thing when the P&L sheet says otherwise?
Because you cannot separate the clinician from the clinical environment. High staff turnover destroys the consistency of the supportive environment, which is the absolute prerequisite for client progress.
And from our sources, a supportive environment is defined as one that is stable, consistent, and predictable.
Exactly. When you have constant staff turnover, you introduce a chaotic influx of novel variables into the client's life.
A new RBT has to learn the client from scratch.
They have to learn the idiosyncratic topographies of the client's behavior. Does a throat clear mean they need a break? Or does it mean they are about to escalate?
Yeah, those little nuances.
They have to learn the specific nuances of the BIP, the timing of the reinforcement, the exact physical layout of the token economy.
And this learning curve creates massive delays.
Severe inconsistencies in contingency delivery and huge plan fidelity problems.
So when a client has a revolving door of RBTs, their progress is going to stall, or worse, severely regress.
Yes.
Not because the behavior plan is written poorly, but simply because the environment is too unstable for steady state responding.
The contingencies are constantly fluctuating because the people delivering them are constantly changing.
Which brings us full circle back to the core benefits of behavior-analytic supervision.
It does. When you provide elite, evidence-based supervision, when you utilize behavioral skills training, when you act as a conditioned reinforcer, when you make your staff feel profoundly competent and successful through outcome-based positive feedback,
They stay.
they stay. You engineer an environment that inoculates them against burnout. By retaining your staff, you maintain pristine treatment fidelity.
Wow.
Therefore, investing in your staff's repertoires is not just a feel-good HR retention strategy. It is the most direct, powerful, and scientifically sound path to maximizing your clients' clinical outcomes.
That shifts the entire paradigm of how to run an ABA business.
Yeah.
You aren't just retaining an employee to save on Indeed recruitment fees.
No, you are actively protecting the integrity of the clinical environment. You are building a fortress around that client's treatment plan.
Every time you invest that quote-unquote expensive 30 minutes into properly modeling, rehearsing, and reinforcing an RBT in the natural environment, you are directly investing in the client's mastery criteria.
That is the exact level of analysis required to be a truly elite behavior analyst. You must view your supervision as the foundational independent variable that drives absolutely everything else in the organization.
This has been an incredibly powerful deep dive. We have gone from the theoretical benefits of supervision down into the molecular granular steps of behavioral skills training and the PDCHS.
We really covered it all.
We've navigated the ethical traps of aversive control, dissected the exact logic you need to pass the Pearson VUE exam, and arrived at a completely new understanding of staff retention as a vital clinical metric. If this helped you, follow Behavioral Intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
At Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just test passers. Us, www.amethysttherapyservices.com. Us, info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
We leave you with this final thought to analyze on your own. If we, as behavior analysts, are the world's foremost experts in understanding the science of learning and changing human behavior, Why do so many ABA agencies rely on non-behavioral, punitive, traditional corporate management structures to run their own companies? Apply the science to your own house. See on the next deep dive.